You're hearing it here first. We're seeing an increase in pre-foreclosures in Southern California. We are going to run through the notices of default, notices of trustee sale, and REO numbers for Southern California in the Southern California Foreclosure Report. And make sure you stick around to the end because we're going to run quickly through two approximately $8 million homes in Newport Coast that are in pre-foreclosure and what we expect to happen to those. And away we go, diving into the data, starting with notices of default. What the heck is a notice of default? Well, a homeowner misses a mortgage payment, or anybody with a mortgage, could be commercial buildings as well. They miss a mortgage payment. And then for homeowners, a minimum of 120 days later, the notice of default can be filed against the property. And then there is public notice that that homeowner is behind. Usually takes much longer to actually file the notice of default. And then 90 days later would be the notice of sale or notice of trustee sale. And that'll actually have a sale date on there. And sale would be 21 days later. And that would be at the courthouse steps. An auction for the property. So 1/20/90/21, that would be the quickest timeline for a foreclosure. So what are we going to do? We're going to look carefully to see if we notice a change in the data. Now we have more normal years. In any given year, even when we had a foreclosure moratorium in 2020 and 2021, there still were foreclosures. And you can see 2015 through 2019, more normal years of foreclosures and notices of default, people missing payments. It happens all the time. Every market, there's going to be people missing payments for various reasons, divorce, death, etc. We can see an interesting trend in 2024, and that is the notices of default for all the counties are up except San Diego. We're going to talk about that in a second because I'm not happy about this. So we can see an increase, in fact, a pretty dramatic increase in the notices of default for Los Angeles. Everybody's up. Now, we did have a couple of years where we didn't have many notices of default filed, and in some cases we could be catching up. But it was pretty consistently in LA, about 300 to the mid 300s for notices of default. This is 600. This is almost double. Now, if we look historically, 2011, things were much higher, and for notices of default, they were higher, and you'll see as we get into notice of sale, even crazier. But this is an interesting trend to see. We have to continue to see if the notices of default continue to go up. What this means is that there may be more opportunities for investors to get a deal on a property. These people in 2024, for the most part, those 600 notices of default filed, they have equity. Back in 2011, when those notices of default were being filed, those over 1,000, most of those people did not have equity. The market had already started to go down. So that's a big difference. And what that means is they don't have to go all the way through the foreclosure process. They could sell at any point in time and still walk away with some money. Going through foreclosure and taking your profits after that is literally the worst way to do it, the most expensive way to do it. Now, what did I say? Was I angry about San Diego? Well, wow, this is not a bad thing. They went from 66 in 2023, notice of default, down to 2. Well, look at that. They must be doing great. No, that is a very frustrating thing that occasionally happens with the data from ICE. We used to be Black Knight, and we've been using the same data source the entire time. Occasionally there's quirks, and we don't know why. We'll find periodic just complete outliers for data. It could be an extremely high number one month for some county that doesn't make any sense, or extremely low number like 2. And I guarantee there were more than 2 notices of default filed in the month of August of 2024, but for whatever reason, it isn't showing up in ICE's data. So I'm frustrated by that, and it does make me and you wonder what other numbers in here could be wrong. Now, do I think they're hiding secretly a bunch of notices of default somewhere? No, I just think for whatever reason, San Diego, they don't have the data. We can check it in the future and see. Moving into the notices of trustee sale. So the second step. And at this point in time, there's going to be a sale date on that notice. Now, often the sale date gets pushed. It doesn't necessarily happen exactly on the date that's on that first notice of trustee sale. Now, when we look at 2015, 2016, we were still coming out of the global financial crisis and all the issues with foreclosures back then. It took a while to unwind all that. And then we got into normal years, the dip that we had from the foreclosure moratorium, and then we can see an increase. So this is interesting. If you watch these foreclosure updates, We haven't seen it actually move into the notice of trustee sale yet in past months, but it does look like those notices of default, some folks are continuing to be behind on payments. They're continuing to not put their property on the market, but they still move into the notice of trustee sale phase. So they definitely didn't sell, definitely didn't come up with a solution for the fact that they're behind on their mortgage. And we're starting to see an increase. And again, an error in the data. No notice of trustee sale in San Diego. Not buying that one. We can see pretty much an increase in just about all the other counties. So this is showing you that some folks now are starting to move into that next phase. But comparing to 2011, and this was a nutso time, 2,233 notices of trustee sale in 2011. Crazy times. And again, those people back then did not have equity. They didn't have anything they could do other than they could do a short sale, an attempt to settle that way. Or you could just do a deed in lieu of foreclosure. You just basically hand over the deed to the bank. Otherwise, you're going all the way through the process. Moving into real estate owned, and San Diego isn't as wacky here, so it looks like this may be accurate. I have it very tight here from 2020 to 2024 because these are the smallest numbers, and when we look at the whole chart, you can't see these numbers because they're so small. Now, we are starting to see a slight increase in certain spots. Some of the counties like Riverside, we had 24 go back to the bank. These are not purchased by a third party at the sale. These are ones that go back to the bank. Now, SB 1079 could allow an individual, a qualified bidder to buy them after the auction sale. And we did a video on that. Make sure you check out the link below or above, wherever it is. And we can see that these numbers still remain pretty small because people aren't getting all the way to this phase. They're selling because they have equity, or they're being purchased at foreclosure sale by someone else, an investor, or it could be purchased by a renter or prospective owner occupant. But it is dangerous for non-experienced professionals to buy a trustee sale. We do not recommend buying there. Use the SB 1079 process and buy after. If that doesn't make any sense, watch my other video. Now you can see why I moved and showed you that narrow band. When we were unwinding the financial crisis, you could see that much higher numbers of bank-owned homes. And that's not every single home that was foreclosed on, because some of those were purchased by a third party. And these are the ones that went back to the bank. So there was much more inventory. And you look at 2011 as, holy smokes, 1,666 homes went back to the bank in 1 month, in August of 2011. So much inventory back then. Now, it took a little while in some cases for these properties to hit the market because you had to get the occupants out as an REO agent. This is what I did for a short time, and you had to then get the property ready, bring it onto the market, dealing with the asset manager to get it priced in live. So the ones that were going back to the bank in August of 2011 didn't show up for anywhere from 3 months to a year later, depending on the situation. But don't forget that there were still people that were doing standard sales, short sales, and bank-owned inventory from previous months that was stacking up. So you just heard me talking about the increase in the notices of default. So we actually have public notice that people are behind on payments, and those numbers are going up for most counties. So this is actually giving us a good opportunity to potentially find some deals. We can use a tool like Foreclosure.com. I talk about that often. I have a link below so you can sign up. In fact, I signed up to show you what is going on behind the scenes of Foreclosure.com. And I'm using Newport Coast just for fun, a neighborhood near me. I'm actually selling my Newport Coast home. It goes live next week. Not a bank owned, not a pre-foreclosure. We're fine there. We're coming as a standard sale, just to let you know. Here is a pre-foreclosure with an estimated value of over $8 million. Let's look a little closer at this one. We can see the auction date has been set, and it's 5 days until the auction as of this shooting. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So using a tool I've shown in a few videos, it's the realist reports. We have access to this as real estate agents. We can take a closer look at this property and find out more information, including the foreclosure history. But here, oh boy, do we have a lot going on. So if we look at the foreclosure history for this property, we can see notice of default, notice of sale, notice of sale, notice of trustee sale. The notices continue to go back for a very long time. In fact, they don't probably show all of them on here. And we can see that the farthest it goes back on just this portion, we could do actually a title search and pull everything. But the first notice of default we're seeing here was filed in 2015 for the amount of $944. Then it continued to be pushed. And then we got a notice of sale that popped out, and that was pushed. So as I mentioned in the one section, the notice of sale can be pushed. In fact, they had notices of sale, and it was being pushed January, February, March. So it continued to be pushed over and over, and here we are finally. Now, this doesn't show the latest of notice of trustee sale in this particular part, but again, we could find it because what we saw on Foreclosure.com is that it's 5 days until the auction. Now, will it be pushed? Yeah, probably, but there's a good chance it may not. And the final judgment amount is $943,750. So when we say people have equity, this is a house theoretically worth over $8 million. And it is behind about $1 million. So if it goes to sale, that could potentially sell for $943,750 to someone, assuming this is first position and there's nothing in front of it. You'd have quite a bit of equity if you bought it at that price. Now, I have a feeling this is going to play out differently, and maybe we'll watch this one and see, and I'll report on it in a later video. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see what happens with 12 Gondoliers Bluff in Newport Coast. Okay, now I'm hooked. Now I got to show you just one more quick one. Don't go anywhere. So this is 34 Sunset Cove in Newport Coast. This one's about 19 days from the foreclosure. Foreclosure.com says this one's also worth about $8 million. Let's see what's going on in the real list. Okay, so here we are in the real list. This one doesn't have as exciting of a foreclosure history as the last one we looked at. So the notice of trustee sale was filed, and it looks like maybe in 19 days, this one will go to sale. This appears to be, looking at this part here, the first time it's going to trustee sale, and it could sell. There's nothing necessarily that shows that it's going to be pushed because we don't have a history of it being pushed. Now, here's what's interesting. So the final judgment amount is over $3 million. This is another one that's worth theoretically over $8 million. And the interesting thing is it was listed recently. So the owner was trying to sell it, and that listing just expired literally a couple weeks ago, and the list price was $7 million. So that estimate of being worth $8 million is maybe not accurate because they tried selling it at $7 million, it didn't go. Although we don't know necessarily if there's some shenanigans going on with that list price without talking to the listing agent. But interesting to see that they did attempt to sell this. They did have equity, and now potentially it's going to go to foreclosure sale. So that's why you got to track these properties. Every single one of them has a different story, and we can dive in and take a closer look and figure out if there's a potential deal here, figure out who the occupant is, we'll figure out if it's an owner occupant or a tenant, and then figure out a plan for each property, reach out to a title company, see who's in first position, make sure you're buying a first and not a second. I talked to somebody who bought a second and owed a huge amount in front of them. And anyway, a long story. I'm getting all excited now. So this is why first sign up for a Foreclosure.com account and you can start tracking these. Make sure you use that link below to sign up for Foreclosure.com so you don't miss a deal. And while you're there, sign up for our free weekly email newsletter so that you don't miss a single important real estate update. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates, and we can't wait to hear from